True Excel mastery is one of the most important career skills you can cultivate. This video is great for both absolute beginners and experienced professionals, building solid foundations in the basics for later lessons on advanced usage, like dynamic arrays. So whether you're just now learning the ropes or have years of Excel experience, this course is for you. Let's begin with a fun exercise. We're going to take this picture of the Empire State Building and fully recreate it in Excel. This lesson will emphasize basic navigation. Feel free to take a screenshot here to paste this into your own Excel, or you can go to the website to download the handout associated with this video, which should also have a picture. And if you're a leveraged breakdown subscriber, you can download the full backup model for this video, linked below. That said, you don't really need any of that to follow along and learn what I have to show you. It just helps for checking your work and auditing specific designs more closely. So, this is the final product in Excel. For reference, this took me about 10 minutes to complete. You probably won't be that fast right off the bat, but you should practice this exercise until you can do it without referencing this video. And change up the picture. Pick something you want to draw, maybe a turtle or a Ferrari, or something geometrically straightforward like the Empire State Building. We made all of this with basic formatting, and we're going to go through it from scratch together. Note, you'll want a full keyboard to work in Excel, preferably with a number pad. If you don't have one, they're pretty cheap on Amazon, and you don't need anything fancy. And you need to be on Excel for Windows. Excel for Mac doesn't handle the same. If you're learning Excel as a career skill, you should definitely study Excel for Windows. First, I want to make a new sheet. Now, I'm about to tell you about our first shortcut. Take note, this series is going to focus heavily on shortcuts. Using Excel is almost synonymous with learning shortcuts until they're second nature, so get used to it now. And after we finish this video, I'm going to trust you will have practiced these shortcuts at least a dozen times each before you move on to the next video. Generally, Excel has two types of command styles for executing keyboard shortcuts. These are sequence commands and combination commands. Now, the greater than sign in my video will denote sequence commands, meaning you can press a key, let go, press the next key, let go, then press the next key. For instance, Alt-H-O-H is the command sequence to change a row's height. We'll revisit that one soon. Now, plus denotes combination commands, meaning you have to press all of those keys at once. For instance, Control-S is the command combination to save your workbook. Okay, so let's do our first Excel shortcut. Let's insert a new sheet and pay attention to the little letters that show up. So first I hit Alt. You can see the little letters at the top. I want to go to something in the home page for inserting a sheet, so I hit H. That opens up the Home tab in my ribbon, which you will notice is minimized. I for Insert, and then S for Sheet. Let's actually move back to the old sheet to see where we are. With a new combination, Command, Control, Page Down. That takes us to the next sheet. And if we move up, as you can see, we've landed on the new sheet that we just created. Now, if we want to go back to the sheet we were just on, looking at the bottom left, you can see that sheet 1 is too little left of art. So a new combination command that I'm going to introduce is Basic Sheet Movement. You can go to the prior sheet with Control, Page Up, which would take me to the far leftmost sheet in the bottom left named Art 2. Now if I hit Control Page Down, I'll go back to the next sheet, and then again to the first sheet that I was on, Art. When I insert a sheet, that sheet is created to the left of the sheet that I'm currently on. So you could see that I was in this Art tab. I inserted a new sheet, and now it's here at Sheet 1. Fun fact, in Chrome, Control Page Up or Control Page Down will cycle through your tabs. In fact, a lot of these Excel shortcuts follow some loose but general conventions with plenty of other applications. Now that we have moved into the new sheet, let's get our bearings. The hierarchy of Excel objects is Workbook, Worksheet, Cell. At the top, an Excel workbook is the file you have saved on your disk, typically ending in XLSX, XLSB, or XLS. The top of your workbook is called the ribbon. This is where all your commands are. Now, the ribbon is where inexperienced users will click through with their mouse. to manually search for the command they want. But using your mouse is slow, and frankly won't cut it if you're looking to build up high-powered models quickly. As you can see, I have the ribbon minimized, and I also have decreased the height of the formula bar. I would recommend the same for you. I have also modified my zoom level in the bottom right. We'll get to this in a moment when we look closer into some sequence commands. But when I press Alt, notice how little letters appear on the ribbon itself. This shows you what letters you can hit next on your keyboard to initiate a sequence command. And if I press through to any of those letters, another series of letters shows up. This keeps going until I actually execute a command. Now, each workbook contains worksheets. Right now, you can see we already have some worksheets. The art sheets contain some finished drawings of the Empire State Building that I made in preparation for this video. The one named Sheet 1 is the brand new sheet that we just created together. By the way, I tried to not put spaces in the sheet names anymore for a pretty niche, advanced reason which will make more sense later. But basically, spaces in sheet names then require you to wrap up any references to said sheet names in apostrophes. If you're a fan of computer science, this has to do with string formatting. So within each worksheet are about 1 million rows, as you can see on the left, and about 16,000 columns, as I can show by going to the far rightmost column here. And the intersection of each represents a cell. For instance, cell A1 is the very first cell in the Excel worksheet. This green box moving around is Excel's own grid-based cursor that highlights the active cell or range. Learning to move this cursor is essential to mastering Excel, so let's dive right in. Most basically, you can click anywhere on the worksheet with your mouse to select a new area. This is bad, you really shouldn't do this. But yes, this is technically a way you can move the cursor in Excel. The next most basic way to move around a worksheet is with the arrow keys, up, down, left, and right. This is a good way to move around in Excel. Generally, when using Excel, you should avoid using the mouse at all costs. So any means of navigation using the keyboard is generally good, whereas using the mouse is bad unless you absolutely have to. As you might pick up, just using the arrow keys is pretty slow to get around, especially if you're traveling over a lot of rows or columns, since you can only move one cell at a time. You can actually jump great distances by holding Ctrl, then pressing any arrow key. So to jump to the next filled cell, you can hit Ctrl and then arrow key. So if I want to go to the next cell or the end of the worksheet, all the way to the right, I hit Ctrl, right arrow, and that takes to the furthest right 16,000 and something most column in Excel column XFD. Now I can go down, Ctrl plus down arrow key, which takes me to the bottom rightmost cell in all of Excel. Cell XFD 1,000,048,576, which you probably won't be getting in your normal body of work. Now, we could get back to cell A1 by pressing Ctrl plus left arrow key, then Ctrl plus up arrow key, as I just did, and I will do again. Let's get back down to that bottom right cell. But let me show you another key movement skill. You can just go to the top leftmost cell by pressing Ctrl, Home. Now, if we actually add some data into these cells, things will get interesting. If I just type X into a few cells, you'll see how I can jump around with the arrow keys hitting the next field cell. You'll see that Ctrl plus arrow key basically sprints your cursor to the next object with data. So let me just drop some X's really quickly. Now what's fun, since we have data, is we can actually get to the cell. So watch me just jump around and hitting the next filled cell, using my Ctrl arrow keys to move up, down, left, and right. So I'm pressing to get back, I'm pressing Ctrl up arrow at the start, Ctrl right, Ctrl down, Ctrl right, up, right, down, right, up, right, And then if I want to go back to the very start, I can just hit Control, Home, and then kind of navigate my way there with the arrow keys. Now what's fun, since we have data, is we can actually get to the cell, not just Control, Home, but get to the top. But we can get to the cell that represents the bottom rightmost range with data, with the new combination command Control, End. Notice that Excel figures out the furthest bottom row and the furthest right row and sends you there if there's not data specifically in that cell. So that's the gist of basic Excel movement with Control arrow key combinations. Now, if you want to highlight cells, you'll need to hold down the Shift key. See how my selected range grows as I hold Shift while pressing the arrow key? But if I let go, it cancels out. You can combine Shift with Control to highlight while you're jumping around. And it also works with Control Home and Control End. Now, in the unlikely case you need to select a few random cells not next to each other, you can hold Control while clicking around with your mouse. This last tip comes in handy in large workbooks. This shortcut F5 helps you jump to any specific cell in any specific sheet. For instance, if I wanted to go back to Tab Art, I type Art, exclamation mark, cell A5. And that takes me to cell A5. And if I want to go back, it's actually already preloaded where I was, so I just have to hit F5, then Enter. You hit OK, and it takes me back. And what's cool, if I change my mind and I want to go back A5, it's already preloaded. So kind of like creates a little link between two sheets that can help you jump around really quickly. Now let's delete all these X's and set up our canvas. I'm going to make our default column width 2 for the canvas area, which makes the cells roughly a square shape. So let's highlight the entire column by hitting Control, Spacebar at the same time. Then let's hold Shift, right arrow, select a good number of columns. Now let's change the column width of our selection with Alt, H, O, W. To change the column widths, again, let's set that to 2, hit Enter. It's not quite relevant at this phase, but keep in mind we can also auto-fit a column's width to the widest contents of a particular selected cell or range with the following shortcut, Alt, H, O, I. And remember, I did say selected range. So if I want to fit it to something larger, it needs to be included in my selection. And finally, if I want the biggest thing I can again, hit Control, Spacebar. Just get the whole column and type Alt, H, O, I, so it fits everything. But sometimes you might just want to make it fit like some of the stuff, and perhaps this is just a large comment off at the bottom that doesn't need to have a full column width, so that's helpful. But let's just set that back to 2, Alt, H, O, W, 2, Enter, and yeah, that's it. And let's create a nice portrait frame around our canvas. I'm going to put down some X's that'll mark the border of our painting. Let's put a lowercase x and A1, then update its alignment. To align the text in the center, I can type Alt, H, A, C. And to align it in the middle, I type Alt, H, A, M. Now, this is a bit more obvious if the row height and the row widths are more prominent, but if it was left aligned, be there, bottom middle, align puts it in the middle center, align puts it in the center. As you can see, so just putting it back to normal, I'll show you those shortcuts in a second. Now let's copy and paste that aligned X over to the top right corner. You can copy with Control-C and you paste with Control-V. Let's look at something nuanced in Excel when it comes to copying and pasting. When you copy something, see that moving border that appears around the cell? That basically means the cell is selected as your copy target. And you'll keep pasting it so long as you use the Control-V command to paste. Well, let's go down to our bottom right cell now and paste it using Enter instead of Control-V. Keep an eye on the cell that currently has the moving border around it in the top right as I hit Enter. Now, if I try to paste that cell again with Enter, nothing happens. Also, with Control V, nothing happens. And as you can see, that border went away. Now, the important thing to note here is basically that Control C has only one command, but pasting has two commands. Control V, which allows you to keep pasting, and Enter, which stops the pasting, and cancels out the original copy target. Now I look at my canvas and it feels a bit skinny. Let's add a few more columns. As I explained earlier, I'm going to highlight the entire column with Control plus spacebar. Then I'm going to add a few new columns with this new shortcut. Control Shift plus. Inserts a new cell, row, or column depending on what you have selected. And this canvas feels a bit short. Let's make it taller by doing the same thing as adding new columns, but by adding new rows. First, select an entire row with this new shortcut, Shift plus spacebar. And we use the same command to add a new row, which again is Control Shift plus. Depending on what you have selected, it adds a new row or a new column. It's pretty intuitive. Let's do that a few times, and our canvas feels tall enough. All right, let's start shading. Shading is when we fill a cell with a color. We can do this with the following shortcut, then manually selecting our color with the arrow keys. So let's use the Control-Shift-Arrow key combination to select our top border area. Then let's type in our newest shortcut for cell shading, which is Alt-H-H. And let's pick a color and hit Enter. Repeat this until we've shaded each of our borders. Now I could type Alt-H-H each time and reselect the same color until I'm done. That won't take very long. But incrementally faster would be to select the next range and just hit F4. A4 is a magical command that just repeats the last thing you did in Excel. Okay, so let's actually go grab that reference image from one of these completed practice sheets. I'm going to make these 2 width as well. Okay, it looks like I just want to match the dimensions, adding rows, maybe killing a few columns. Let's actually keep the columns for a moment. And then the goal now is really just to get a bit more artistic. Understanding how to drop in shades and how to repeat actions. We'll explore a few commands, but we're going to draw this thing right now. So this is really what you came for. Thanks for making it this far in the video. So Alt-H-H opens my cell shading menu. And if I hit M, that actually allows me to choose more colors. And what I'm going to just look for visually, something that's a bit between brown and gray. And this is a standard palette, which is helpful. But if I'm trying to get a little bit more nuanced, I can use this custom color picker. And I'm just kind of trying to eye it out. Putting my foot right next to it, that might help. I think that's good enough. So yeah, that's kind of a yellowish brown. Might just want it to be a little bit less yellow. I use that. It's not quite the same. I kind of pick a different color every time. Let's just go with this color for this one. So here it is. The first tip of that spire, which is the color we want, and we really just eye that out by pressing Alt-H-H. And then M for the more colors. Went from standard to the custom and really just clicked our mouse around until we found a color we liked. I want to take this color down. Obviously, there's copy paste, Enter, or Control V. Another shortcut that we haven't touched on would just be to drag down a style with Control D or dragging right a style with Control R. So if I go underneath a cell that is filled, I can hit Control D and it will just take whatever's up there. If I have a number in there, it'll take the number 2. Now I can also drag right a style. Now this cell to the right is blank. So if I drag right a blank cell, it's basically the same as deleting whatever's next to it. Or I can drag right a cell that has color in it, and that works too. FYI, this is only possible going down to the right. A lot of people ask, there's no equivalent for going to the left and up copying left and up with a shortcut like that, but it's fine. Now, looking at the spire, I just generally think it's a bit too thick. Let's sort that out right now. With the column width shortcut that we already touched on, which is Alt-H-O-W, I'm going to think that 0.5 works Spire enough. And I'm really just trying to match the height of the same image. So let's just select the entire row with Shift, Spacebar, just to get everything. And then I'm going to hit Control D. And I'm using those green lines in the spacebar to kind of see how my spire compares size-wise. And this is where I can see it's a bit larger. But I don't think it gets that big. So again, I think 1, not 0.5, but I think 1. So that's Alt-H-O-W. And I hit 1 and I hit Enter. I think that's good. And it goes down for 2 of those. And we'll get to those yellow lights in a second. But this is the width that I want. Now obviously we've got our first introduction of another color. So let's just go in and find a nice yellow. Actually, think this default yellow is kind of nice. I guess they call it gold, it's nice. But what we're missing from our color is really that window effect going on. Or I'm not sure what they call it, but the borders. So to between each of those yellow squares. So I think the custom border menu is a great way to do that effect. So borders are obviously a big part of Excel and Excel modules. People use them for some lines to divide tables. You can actually access the full functionality of borders in Excel by opening the custom border menu with Alt-H-B-M. M generally in Excel means like more. So you can like FC font color more, fill more, all those open up. More detailed menus that are one of the instances in which it's all right to use a mouse, and not just the keyboard because it's a bit hard to navigate with this, something other than your mouse. So we can just play around with it for a second. You know, you can choose different options, you can make the borders even within one selection. You can make the borders all sorts of colors and styles, right? So I don't know why anyone would want their colors to look like that, but if I blow that out onto a bigger cell, you can kind of see what's going on there. I'm going to delete that with Control D, but you get the point. There's lots of flexibility with borders, different colors and everything all in the same place. Now there's some pre-made ones here that you can easily click just to turn them off and whatnot. So if you don't like clicking it, that's cumbersome. These do the same thing. It'll just choose whatever you've got selected, so just do nothing. I'm going to click none. And that's how you could build borders. Now, like I said, I'd rather just recreate this effect a bit more minimalistically. It's just black. And one important thing about borders is there's actually quite a good number of pre-made border shortcuts that save you even more time. So if I type Alt-H-B, you can see all of my options for different border types. Now what I'm actually going to want to end up using is top and bottom border, which creates these little lines right here. And now I'm going to cut and paste everything so that my lights look good, but I don't want that top border, the very top. So you can call all borders touching a cell. I'm not going to use this cell, but I'm using the cell right above the lights because I want to just kill the one border that touches that using Alt-H-B-N, which clears borders. And then I'm going to do that again by just pressing F4. To repeat that command, which is otherwise Alt-H-B-N. And I've cleaned up those external borders because I really just want them in between each light. Alright, now our spire's looking pretty good, so let's keep building downwards. The next part is interesting. It's like a thin horizontal yellow light. So if I copy-paste my spire's light and try to create that thin horizontal yellow light, I notice two things. First, it's way too thick. Second, I don't like that border. So let's fix that with 3 shortcuts. First, I'm going to just select the whole road, make it easy, and type Alt-H-O-H to change my columns, my row's height. And I'm going to point out that although the row's height is 15, the column width's 2. So height and widths don't use the same units, because if I make it 15 by 15, it looks like this. So just keep that in mind when it comes to Excel. They're not the same units for height and width. I'm not quite sure what they are. I'm sure it's easy to figure out, but it's not the same. And then you can type Alt-H-O-H to change the height again. And let's just put in 3 to see what that looks like. I think that 3 is fine. Now let's kill the border with Alt-H-B-N. And then let's create a thick outside border, because you can kind of see a little bit of thickness around that with Alt-H-B-T. And then again, it really is just a second one. So if I copy the whole row, actually I can hit Shift Spacebar and then I can hit Control C. Now I go down to this next row. If I don't highlight the row and I try to paste, it'll give me an error. So I just need to hit Shift Spacebar and then Enter to kill the selection to make the next yellow light. I do think it's a bit wider though. So let's just do that and you'll see that I've got ugly borders for whatever reason. Alt-H-B-N, kill the borders, and then Alt-H-B-T to lay down the thick borders that is drastically wider than it is in the picture. So let's just give it a little bit less column width than those 2 outlying ones. And now it looks like we've kind of just got these like gray things that also are the same width but have thick borders. Let's just make that a little bit taller though. 10. No, I'm thinking 8. Not quite. Yeah, let's just go with that. And then the color is much more gray. So I'm going to type Alt-H-H, and then I think this actually default gray looks fine. I think that it's still too tall. 5. 5 is good. And then back to my building color. Right there. I'm going to do Alt-H-O-H one last time, 10, and you can kind of see I've lined it up decently. Well, this one is a bit more pinkish. So I'm going to open up my color context, and you can see I kind of get closer to the reds there. So I'll put that down. It kind of looks about right. So let me copy this now. And I can see my building now has a bit more width at the bottom. This is a darker shade, so again, Alt-H-H-M. And I can kind of just drag this in the darkness of it, or what have you, to make it a bit more of a darker shade. And then it lightens up again. Predominantly because of those lights. I'm going to get back to those lights later, and I'm just going to pull it down. This is where it starts to get a bit easier. Control R brings everything to the right. Bring it down. And then again, I'm highlighting the row with just Shift Spacebar. I'm using those green lines to measure again where it's at. And then I have another increase in width here. I actually think 1 column width is pretty good look right now. I can just go ahead and copy this column. But that's probably too much. So 1's there and then another 1, so scratch that. And then take that there, all happens down there. And I'm just hitting Control R, pull things to the right, and Control D to take them down. Really, that's what I'm doing. This is obviously tedious. I can just highlight the whole row and then hit Control D to take it. And really, the Empire State Building just keeps going. So I've got the structure of it. It gets darker each phase. So I'm going to make this a bit darker than this one. So yeah, I just use my mouse, so sometimes it works, but generally you're not painting the Empire State Building in Excel. So it's more numbers focused. This is a lot more brown than I thought it would end up being, but let's just work with it. And then let's just take this and put it somewhere between those two. And I think that's a decent baseline for my Empire State Building. Now, there's a couple of things we can focus on. What I think is worthwhile is probably going to be getting a bit more of that dimensionality going, because I'm seeing like the lighting creates this lighter effect. So I want to just get some more coloration there. I don't need that one. Let's do that. Let's actually lay down some lights with a similar color. You can see some of the old colors I've chosen down here in this recent colors menu. I'm just going to go back and grab these. And now let's do, I think one of the more interesting features of this building is the windows. Because in Excel, you can actually do a pretty decent job making those rather quickly. So obviously you want black to be your window. But that doesn't look that great, right? It's just clearly a lot more detail that even though this isn't the highest resolution image you can see, like a lot more detail going on in these windows. And I think that's another good case for the borders. So I'm going to just remember which brown this one is. So that's my second recent color brown. I'm going to highlight this. A little too far. That was me going all the way down to the bottom of the worksheet with Control-Shift-Down arrow, which takes you to the million row. So I want to select this black window and give it a little more spice. With Alt-H-B-M to open up just more borders. Now remember, I can choose a border color. I checked, I think it's the second brown. And now I really just want to add inside and outside borders. Yeah, that's good. That gives me a bit more of the actual window equipment. F4 to repeat it. I'm liking my windows now, so let me make a few more. They kind of stopped short of the very top of the buildings. Just bring this one here. It's not going to perfectly recreate it because I would probably need to make a few more rows and columns. But I think this is a pretty good Empire State Building. And let me create these little ones on the right with another interesting trick. So I think just to give it a bit more depth, let's change the color a bit. You can kind of see the colors a bit different. Maybe I can make these 2.5. I think that's fine. Now I'm going to bring up the formatting menu, which is Control-1. This takes you to the same place that you can get with a few other shortcuts, but it's just generally the Formatting Context Detail menu. Again, I'm using my mouse in this particular instance. A lot of formatting stuff can generally justify mouse usage, but I want to put in a pattern color. So I'm just choosing black, and then I'm picking one of these like 50% grays to kind of shade in those bottom layer windows. And put it down there on the right and left. You can kind of see they've got those going on there, and you know, I feel like I still want a bit more division, so I'm going to add some more borders. Top border only has Alt-H-B-P just under those lights, I think. And then I think I need to add some lights here too. Again, Alt-H-B-P. I'm just going to take this chunk and put it there too, just to give me that lighting effect. This feels a little out of place now. Make that 5. And I think we've got ourselves a pretty decent Empire State Building. Now you can compare it to my earlier attempts. Perhaps I went a little crazy on the brown. You can just consider this. My artistic desires burgeoning out as I figure out my favorite way to paint the same building over and over again. Perhaps you can let me know in the comments which one is your favorite, whether you like Art 1, Art 2, or Art 3. But that's, you know, really we have some excess rows and columns. So again, adding rows and columns is Control Spacebar, add a column to select the column, Shift Spacebar just like the row. And now if we've got a column selected, and if I hit Control-Shift plus, it adds 1. Well, if I do Control-Shift plus, or actually just Control minus, it takes away. So I'm just deleting the excess from my frame. So I've just got one cell to the extremity of any point of my art here. And that's about it. Now, you can see I need to add some rows to make this as tall as it should be though, right? Interesting. Yeah, there we go. Now I added a couple rows in the center just to give my Empire State Building a bit more height. As you can see in this example, I've actually got two print ranges set up which lets you hit print, and then you can have this nice little PDF. Whatever other kind of printer you have set up just in 2 pages. So how do you do that? You have to use your mouse. So, Control-Shift-Right arrow key, you can select that first range, but then you want to select the second range, and you have to hold Control while clicking the box around whatever it is you want. And I messed up there, so let me just do that. Now I'm going to hold Control and click and drag to select 2 different areas. I'm going to type Alt-P-R-S to set a print area. I'm going to type Alt-W-I to show print area preview. My print range height, I'm just going to type Alt-P-H-1 and Alt-P-W-1. 1 is Alt-P-H. You can see it highlights that part where it says height. So I just type 1 to make it 1 page. Alt-P-W, also 1 just to make it 1 page. I want to adjust the margins, so I want my print margins to be narrow. Generally, narrow is good. Your orientation's important. Portrait or landscape. I actually wanted to remain portrait just like a phone. You can set multiple print ranges like we've already done. Control-P is one way to print a file. You can just hit Control-P, or you can hit F12 and hit Save As, and Save As PDF should be an option. You can also hit F12 to save up your file. Rename it. You can see my file name here is usually the date and then the time and military time. But that's just the way that I like to format it. Generally preferred timestamps and the file name. It just helps. So that's about it. Like I said, you should do this on your own several times with your own pictures of your own choice. You don't need to be perfect or particularly artsy, but you should run through these motions and have some fun familiarizing yourself with these basic Excel controls. If you can master movement and formatting basics, you've laid a strong foundation for advanced modeling tricks. But there's no point moving to the advanced stuff if you aren't comfortable with the basics, so you should practice this.